Hey, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Thoughts from JTJ. I'm James T. Jones, and it's been a long time since I've shared some of my thoughts on some of the business topics that we talk about. But today I'm going to do this a little bit differently. It's been a long 6 or 7 months in 2020 with everything that's gone on with the pandemic, the social injustice movement, and the impact that that's had on numerous people globally, here in the United States, friends, family members, colleagues. But this time, during this lockdown and everything that's gone on and transpired, has given me a very unique opportunity to speak with colleagues and family members. And in some of those conversations, have been extremely intense, deep conversations about how all the things that have gone on have affected the people I know, how it's affected me, how it's affected my family. And the reality is, to be quite honest with you, I've had to tell some people straight up that I believe the U.S. justice system isn't broken. And that's difficult for some people to accept. And I understand that. But stick around for this episode, and I'll share with you my thoughts, my experiences, and even some of the detailed conversations that have gone on that have led me to truly believe that our U.S. justice system is not broken. So in this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the pandemic, a lot about opportunities to learn, and a lot about how all that has gone on this year has impacted our country. And to be honest, I'm just going to share my frank thoughts with you about it. Some people may not like it. Some people may understand, but the hopes is that we can continue these conversations beyond just this year. At the end of the day, like a lot of my colleagues that I've spoken to, I love this country. I'm not giving up my citizenship. But the truth is I feel guilty about feeling that way. It's kind of like we watch those movies and shows where you can see the bad relationship that someone's in, the relationship that's causing them problems or abusive or whatever it may be, and we're like, why don't you just get out of it? No, as a black man in this country, you kind of feel like you're in that type of relationship in some ways, like, so to speak, metaphorically. It's tough. And then to have an administration that is set on dividing us makes it even just so much tougher. And that, I think the division really kind of sparked a lot of discussion around the social injustice movement, right? And this led to a lot of really good, unique conversations with my colleagues. And instead of talking in generalities, I'll share with you some specific stories. Matter of fact, I'll be very revealing in this. And again, some people may not appreciate it, but I'm gonna keep it real. I think some of the best conversations I had with some of my colleagues started, I want to say, right around the Breonna Taylor incident, when it really stepped into the public, and there was a lot of support from athletes on justice for Breonna Taylor. And that's when the phone calls started really pouring in from my colleagues, like, hey, James, you're a sports guy, I'm a sports guy, talk to me about this. And I'll share with you two specific colleagues. One of them, his questions were more inquisitive, like, hey, James, in sports, do you think it's right for athletes to take a stance? Do you think it's fair for athletes to take a stance? And his questions were more around the realm of, shouldn't it be bigger than the athletes, right? Like, shouldn't the coaches, shouldn't the owners, shouldn't the business be taking this stance, not just the athletes? So we had a really good exchange about the pros and the cons of the approach, and what it meant. And in conclusion, it came down to it is unfortunate in some ways that these athletes have to step up on their platform to speak out because the mass majority won't. And he understood that. But the answer I gave to him, the ultimate answer I gave to him, which I'll share in a moment, was the same as I gave to another colleague of mine. And I'll preface this with, I call him a colleague because we've known each other since we were teenagers, and we come from two very different backgrounds. He comes from the southern country background. I come from the urban city background. But our commonality is that both of our dads our fathers were MPs. So we have this respect for military and police, and so we've always kind of bonded being these military kids. But his mindset when he reached out was, athletes should just shut up and play basketball. Like, we don't watch sports to watch athletes talk about social injustice. This is not the place. You shouldn't have the ability to just walk out on your job. And that was his opinion. And it's a very different perspective than my other colleague who was more inquisitive. But the answer is the same. And what I had to explain to him was, don't assume just because somebody makes a lot of money that these issues don't affect them that's going on, that Breonna Taylor's killing or Ahmaud Arbery's killing doesn't affect them, right? And I had to explain to him that, look, these athletes, these people that you see as entertainers, they are someone's son, they're someone's daughter, they're someone's brother, they're someone's sister. They are parents. They are people first. And I think we tend to forget that because their lives are put on public display and we feel like we know them and we don't know them at all. And it's tough to have to remind someone that you've known majority of your life of the little things like that. And it's, he said to me this comment, well, you made it, so it's possible. And I get that, but just because you see me as a black man or a man of color, that you think everything is fair and possible, because it's not. It really isn't. Like, this country is the land of opportunity for so many people, and it has been for so long. But not so much for black people. Like, it's not the same for black people. And I had a conversation with a couple of coaches that I coached Little League Baseball with the morning after the Rashad Brooks killing. And all of my colleagues that were coaching, none of them looked like me, right? And this is post George Floyd. They were sickened by all these events, and these things are coming to light for them. And they couldn't believe that this was happening in Atlanta, where an unarmed black man was shot in the back. But then there was this wrinkle of he had a taser. But the conversation went down the road of, well, this Wendy's was burned down and torched, and this convenience store was torched after the events took place. And my colleagues couldn't grasp why the people in the community would burn down the buildings in their community. And I listened to them talk about this for a few minutes as we're kind of in between games at a tournament. And I chime in and I just say, guys, the truth is that Wendy's and that convenience store in their community, it doesn't matter. Like, the people in that community don't own anything. They don't own the houses that they live in. Most of them are Section 8 tenants or renters and just trying to get by. Like, they don't own anything. For the most part, most people, black people in America, don't own anything. And I'm not saying that no black people own anything. I'm just saying, of the mass majority, we don't own much. And think about it like this. Latin Americans have been coming here for the past few decades from south of the United States. And quote unquote, it's illegal, right? Even though there have been other demographics that have come here, right? At one point, Italians immigrated here, and people from Ireland immigrated over, Europeans immigrated over, Latin Americans are now coming over, quote unquote, illegally, but they are coming over. East Indians have come over. But when you look at today, the percentage of home ownership in the United States, Latin Americans own more than Black Americans. East Indian families are coming here and their kids are getting education. They're developing wealth. Their parents are coming over educated. They are surpassing the black community, and blacks have been here for 400 plus years. The difference really is opportunities aren't provided the same. And when I explain that to some of my colleagues, they ask me, well, if that's the case, like, how do you deal with this? Like, these situations where you're seeing black people be killed by police, where you live in a society where a group of people being suppressed, like, how do you deal with that? Like, why aren't you angry, right? One of my colleagues asked me, like, straight up, like, James, he's from Europe. He says, we don't deal with this quite the same in Europe. Like, how do you process all this and go on about your day in corporate America as if everything's fine? And here's the truth, and I'll share this with you. And keep in mind, I'm gonna bring you into the dinner table of Black Americans, at least since the 1980s, right? Since I was a kid. We're taught two primary things growing up. And this stands true for pretty much every Black American household in the United States. We're taught two primary things. The first one is that you will have to work 3 times as hard as anyone else in everything you do. Every day, we're reminded that you must work 3 times as hard, if not 4 times as hard, than your counterpart who doesn't look like you to be able to achieve the same things. You have to work harder all the time. Not sometimes, not when that situation seems right, but all the time. And you have to do that for the second thing that we're taught. Hope. We are taught to be hopeful for what we want. Meaning, when I was a kid, my parents used to sit at the dinner table and say, hey, look, how did school go today? Da, 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 da. How are your grades? Da, da, da. You have to work 3 times as hard. You have to work 4 times as hard in hopes that when you graduate grade school, you will get into college. You have to be a straight A student in hopes that if a police officer ever stops you or runs into you or you need anything, you hope that they don't see you as a threat. You hope that they know you're a straight A student at the local school. Then you go off to college, hopefully getting accepted into a college, and you have to work 3 or 4 times as hard in hopes that you are seen as someone who can go out and get a job, in hopes that a company will hire you. And then when you get into that company, you have to work 3 times as hard in hopes that company will give you the recognition and respect for a promotion, and hope that when you get that promotion, that someone else doesn't see you as a threat and have you removed. It's hard work and hope. And when you're taught that all your life, you don't go through every day angry because you're hopeful. When you're an adult and things aren't fair, you're already used to working 3 times as hard. But you realize as you become more experienced in life that it's not the same for everyone else. And look, you can almost every black person in this country has that visceral moment, that moment of realization. And it usually happens before the age of 15 years old, where they know that the world sees them as different, or more specifically, in this country, they're seen differently, right? And you know what? It's so visceral. It's there in their mind every single day. It feels like it happened yesterday. And I'll share with you. This is Thoughts from JTJ. I'll share with you my moment, my visceral moment, and I'll never forget it. It took place in 1990. I was 10 years old. And I lived in a suburban Jacksonville, Florida neighborhood. It was the first time that I remember as a kid where we weren't living on military housing. We were now outside of the military base in a community because my dad chose to live off base instead of on base, just for a different environment for us in school, for me and my sister. But in 1990, we lived in this cool township in Jacksonville, Florida, and it was new. Houses were still being built, but my neighborhood was finished. And across the street from our house, directly across the street, was I think it was the only 2-story house in the neighborhood for quite some time, but it was one of the first houses in the neighborhood. And they had a beautiful yard. Their yard was always immaculate. It consistently 1 yard a month. And so that summer, I talked to my dad about wanting to cut grass and wanting to have a yard that looked that good. So I wanted to help my parents out with the yard. My parents worked. The couple across the street, they were older and their kids were grown up and gone. So early in that summer, I had started working on the yard, and my neighbor across the street, the older gentleman, he noticed that I was out working on the yard. So he spoke to me one day, and we kind of chatted, and that was cool. That was my first interaction with this gentleman, and things were good. And then one day, they came home with a brand new 1990 Nissan Maxima. And at that point, it was the coolest car, in my opinion, I'd ever seen. And I remember going over to his garage during that summer one day. He was in the garage and got his attention and asked if I could see this car. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. He brought me to the garage, turned the keys on in the ignition, just to light it up. And it was the coolest car I'd ever seen, right? It was black on black. It had cool wheels. It had the seatbelt for the first time ever. I had seen a seatbelt that automatically goes up and down, and you just do the latch manually. It had a great sound system. This was hands down the coolest car I had ever seen. And at that moment, I knew I wanted this car. And so I asked him right there that day, I said, when I'm 16 in like 5.5 years, I want to buy this car from you. And he was like, absolutely. Let's make it happen. And that was cool because, going into starting my first business, I had a sense of motivation, a goal, and a purpose. And I was out that summer cutting grass. And it was all with the plans of saving money to purchase this gentleman's car in 5 or 6 years, right? Kid, what do you do? But as the summer went on, I went to do my grandparents' tour. So I go to New York, I go to North Carolina every year. And I had gotten back from North Carolina, and I was sitting in our front room. It was kind of our family kind of TV room. It was located right off the porch in the front door. So if you raise the blinds, you can see out into the front porch or whatever. And I remember getting a knock at the door. And my dad was kind of doing something in the other kind of dining room area. So he kind of came over, he got to the door and answered it. And I could tell that once the door opened, I could hear the voice, and I could kind of tell from the kind of silhouette that, hey, it was the guy from across the street. And I heard him talking to my dad for a moment, didn't think much of it, and then my dad calls my name. He's like, hey, come to the door. And so I get to the door, and sure enough, it's the gentleman from across the street, my dad. And I kind of see this look on my dad's face, and my dad goes, someone keyed our neighbor's car. My first thought was like, whoa, by keyed, you mean someone scratched up my future car. Like this, we're talking about my future car, right? And so the gentleman then starts to talk, and he lets me know that it's okay, it's going to be all right, but I need to just explain why I did it. And I'm like, time out. You think that I did this to your car? Like, I didn't do this. So I explained to my dad and him, I did not key his car. Like, I wouldn't key his car. This is my future car. This is a car I'm going to buy in 5.5 years. And I could see the anger building on my dad's face. And I can see the determination on my neighbor's face. And my neighbor then interrupts my dad and tells him, look, just have him admit to it. And at that point, I was just stuck. Like, I was going to get in trouble for something I know I didn't do. And so my dad then asks him, and look, when did this happen? Trying to kind of keep the conversation going. And the gentleman was very adamant. He was like, it happened yesterday around lunchtime. And I know it was your son because I saw him leave my garage, get on his bike, and ride off. And my dad kind of got this look on his face. And he said, so this happened yesterday. The guy's like, yesterday afternoon. And they said, that's interesting. Because I picked my son up from North Carolina yesterday afternoon, and we didn't get back home until right around midnight. So there was definitely no way it was my son. And so at that point, for me being 10 and a half years old, going on 11, whatever, it was a sense of relief. But at the same time, nothing mattered. Like, it didn't matter that I had said repeatedly I didn't do it and I wouldn't do it. It didn't matter how clear I was about it. It didn't matter that I was a straight A student. It didn't matter that I spent this entire summer cutting grass in my own business, being responsible enough to do that, manage my money, meet my neighbors, build a business with the goal of buying this car in 5 years. None of that mattered. And to make matters even worse, I knew every kid in our neighborhood, everyone, because our neighborhood was a circle. I knew every single kid in the neighborhood. And so I went out asking the kids in my neighborhood if anybody knew who keyed that car. And if someone would have known who keyed that car, I would have definitely been told about it. But the thing that made it worse is no other kid in the neighborhood was asked about keying the car. My neighbor didn't go to anybody else's house. He didn't ask any other parent. No one else even knew that the car had been keyed until I asked them about it. And think about that for a minute. At 10 years old, having to accept the realization that your neighbor is blaming you for something you didn't do. And they didn't ask any other kid in the neighborhood. And you know that you're the only brown kid in the neighborhood. You've been there for about a year. We had one other brown family in the neighborhood, and they were East Indian couple, and they had 3 daughters. So that removed them from the equation because they had all girls. He saw a boy. Like, that's the moment for me that I realized that no matter what, I'm going to be seen as differently because I'm the brown guy. And that's a terrible thing for a kid to have to process at 10 years old. But that's the reality for almost every Black American at a very young age. So when I see videos today, like there was a sheriff in Georgia, her name was Stacey Talbert, and she posted a very emotional video on Facebook about how she went through a McDonald's drive-thru one morning and ordered food while she was in her police cruiser. And suddenly, when she went to receive her order through the drive-thru, they took an extremely long time to give her her food. And this was post George Floyd's murder, about 2 or 3 months after George Floyd's murder. And she just expressed how uncomfortable it made her feel to be judged based on her job, how unfair it felt, how she felt like someone was willing to go to lengths to hurt her through her food because she was a police officer and people didn't trust cops right now. And she had anxiety from it, that she couldn't wait to, quote, get out of her uniform for the next few days and just put on normal clothes and live a normal everyday life. And she even mentioned that she couldn't wait until this just blew over, right? Like this whole situation just went away, and hopefully sooner rather than later. And it was a very well done short video. And I completely understand her perspective, because no one should have to feel like that. Like, it sucks to have to feel like that someone is willing to do you harm because of your job. But at the same time, that feeling that she feels, that anxiety, always being judged and being looked at different. Someone willing to do you harm just because of who you are, not knowing anything about you. It's almost like, talk to me when you dealt with that for 30 years. That feeling that she had been feeling for about 2.5 months. Brown people feel in this country every single day. And that's why when George Floyd was murdered, people took to the streets in the middle of a pandemic to march. They didn't care about catching the virus and potentially dying. They were standing up because they were tired of feeling just like Officer Talbert felt. And unlike Officer Talbert, I can't take my skin color off so I can just blend in tomorrow. Like, I can't go into the office different tomorrow. I can't go to the grocery store different tomorrow. I can't walk through the parking lot and a police officer see me as different tomorrow. And it doesn't just blow over for me. It doesn't blow over for so many people. And that's what people are willing to march for. And I know that a lot of people talked about how all of this marching was a problem and interrupted business and life. But man, when you've dealt with this for 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years, like, it's tough, man. Like, if you don't live it every day, I can't fault you for not grasping it, and that's why I'm sharing it. And I think Officer Talbert did a good job of explaining how messed up of a feeling it is to feel that way. She shouldn't have to feel that way. I shouldn't have to feel that way. It's not right for anybody to have to feel that way when they're just doing their job, when they're just being themselves. And the reality is, the George Floyd murder sparked this. And I had a colleague of mine who doesn't look like, asked me, he just was straight up about it. He was like, look, man, I don't know why you all chose George Floyd as your hero. Like, he was a failed rapper. He was in prison. Like, why would you choose him as your hero? Like, why him? It took a moment for me not to lash out at my colleague for his question in that tone. But I also recognize that he didn't quite understand why people were marching after the George Floyd murder. And I had to explain to him that George Floyd isn't our hero. George Floyd was a martyr. Let me put it to you like this. The video that was posted of the George Floyd murder captured 8 minutes and 46 seconds of an officer kneeling on his neck. And that 8 minutes and 46 seconds, and it's almost like it captured in a condensed way 450 years of oppression in this country. And everybody in that video represented everybody, right? Like, think about it. George Floyd was inside of a store. He was determined suspicious. He was removed from the store and taken against his will, shackled, placed face down, and then the officer kneeled on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, knowing that George Floyd couldn't go anywhere. He was gasping for air. He was begging for relief. He was urinating on himself. And in that time, not even the other officers who knew it was wrong did anything to intervene their counterpart. And so when you think about that, George Floyd representing an entire race of black people in this country over the past 450 years, the officer representing a system designed to suppress that race of people. And then even as you saw this happen in high definition, in broad daylight on a city street, you can see people walking by, looking at the situation clearly, and continuing to walk on to go on about their day. Just like a lot of us in this society in the United States go on about our day, even though we see these unjust things being done to a specific group of people. There were Asian business owners, there was East Indian business owners, there were white business owners, there were all these different people on the street, and no one did anything but watch for a moment and then go back on about their day. And that was the thing that sparked the national movement of protest of social injustice in 2020, because everyone was represented in that video. And that's why this time it wasn't just black people marching. There were white people there, there were Latinos there were Asian people there, everybody came together, because that video captured in its visceral form everybody's role in this social injustice system in the United States of America. And that was different. It was no longer one NFL player taking a knee saying police brutality, we need to stop it. Because that was just a few years ago. And the same people who said, oh, we got to get rid of him, are now the same ones going, no. Now we see it. We see our role in this. We were the people who just walked by, casually seeing it. And now you've got the NFL standing up for this. You got other players, coaches, and even owners who wanted no part in this whole social justice movement. A few years back when Colin Kaepernick was saying this is a problem, willing to risk his job, now you've got big business, you got Target involved, you got Old Navy, you got these major corporations saying we've got to do our part to fix this. And that's what that George Floyd video captured. Heck, even the state of California is considering reparations for black people. And that was the real reality. So George Floyd was not our hero. He was unfortunately a martyr for the cause. And I had to explain that to my colleague that I've known for a long time. And one of his responses to me was, okay, I understand, but like, James, you've never had to deal with this. I mean, George Floyd was not, he wasn't educated. He didn't dress a certain way. Man, I wish it were true that who we are as individuals, as black people in our community, matters. But honestly, it like what I've done doesn't, in that way, it doesn't matter, right? Like, Like when I was 16 years old, my dad gifted me a 4-year-old Mercedes 190E. It wasn't the biggest Mercedes in the world. It wasn't cool. It was an E-Class, and that was considered luxurious. It's luxurious, a luxury vehicle. At 16 years old, driving around in a Mercedes 190E, I literally got pulled over 2 to 3 times every week. Every week. Because I was a young black kid in a luxury vehicle. It was so bad that after about 9 months of having that car, I asked my dad if we could sell it so I could get a non-luxury car. I got a Pontiac. Like think about that. If you were a 16-year-old kid and your parents who work hard gift you a Mercedes because you're a straight A student and you do everything responsible, and you have to give it back and ask them to get you a lesser car just so you don't get pulled over by police every single week. Like that sucks. If I looked different and I wouldn't get pulled over every single week. Like the amount of excuses that I got from officers on why they pulled me over. Oh, well, there's been a break-in in the area and this car fits the description. Oh, there's been a break-in in the area or a robbery or someone called. Like, no, it didn't. You pulled me over because I'm young and I'm black and I'm in a nice car. Like, that sucks. And it didn't stop there. Like, even as an adult, like, I was living in Lake Forest, Illinois, a prominent area of Illinois, after I got my first job at a major company out of college. I was in my lower 20s, fresh out of college. I went to the grocery store and there was a Marshall's. And I went to that Marshall's to pick up a little suit that I had altered and a tie that I had paid for the week before. And on my way out of the Marshalls, carrying this little Marshalls bag with, a hanger, officers approached me from the rear in their car, lights on the megaphone, asking me to get down on the ground. And at first, I didn't even think they were talking to me until it became more intense, more yelling through the megaphone, and another officer gets out and starts pointing at me. And so I stop and turn around, and all he yells at me is, "Get down, get down, get down." And at this point, I'm thinking to myself, is there something going around me I'm not aware of? But he approaches me telling me I have to get down, and I'm holding this bag. And next thing you know, he's pushing me to the ground, turns me around, handcuffs me, puts me face down on the ground. And he hasn't even asked me for my name. He hasn't asked me for anything. And I'm laying there trying to figure out what's going on. And he picks me up and puts me on the side of my BMW and starts to ask me as he's patting me down what my name is and where do I live. And I'm shocked. It takes what feels like 15 minutes. I don't know if it was 5 minutes or 12 minutes or 30 minutes. For him finally to listen to me as I'm starting to gather my thoughts and explain to him my name, where I live, where I work. I get no responses from this officer other than questions. What am I doing here? Where did I come from? I'm telling him the store I came out of, the store I was in before, that this is a suit that I have in my hand. I just have altered. I have the receipt in my pocket. My driver's license is in my pocket. I just came from work. I'm in a pair of khakis and a polo and nice loafers. And then he puts me back on the ground, face down, as he goes through my car and my wallet. And I'm telling him where my ID badge is. I'm telling him my address, which is on my license. And they're not giving me any information as to why I'm in this situation. I'm just told, don't move. Be quiet. All to find out that some lady said that someone stole something out of her purse. It certainly wasn't me. But I fit the description. And the only thing that I can think about at that moment, after the officers have stood me up now and started to take handcuffs off and let me know, oh, well, we just had to, a lady said that something was stolen from her purse, blah, blah, is, man, it's amazing how just like when I was 10 and a half years old and my neighbor came to my house, it doesn't matter who I am or what I do. Here's another white person who describes me, and I'm guilty until absolutely proven innocent. Like it didn't matter that I had graduated college with an advanced degree. It didn't matter that I had a great job at a major healthcare company. It didn't matter that I drove a nice car. It didn't matter that I was dressed nice. It didn't matter. I didn't do anything wrong. I was the black guy in the parking lot. Just like I was the black kid in the neighborhood. Like, that sucks. And just like people say, well, George Floyd didn't comply with officers. He didn't comply. If he would have complied, he wouldn't have died. Man, I can look up countless videos online of people not looking like George Floyd, who don't comply with officers, who don't get killed. And at this point in my life, honestly, man, as many times I pulled over, it sucks to have to make an officer feel safe when they come to my car. Like, I get it. Officers put their lives on the line every day for my safety. I don't think we should defund police. Maybe we can demilitarize police a little bit. But defunding police is definitely not something I believe in. But I will tell you this, along with that statement. It sucks to feel like that it's my job to make an officer feel safe. First of all, and at this age, at my age now, at 40 years old, I don't even attempt to anymore. Like, I just assess the situation and do what I think is right to do. As any law-abiding citizen should. And that's really because, and I don't advise anybody to see it my way, but as an officer, you literally have a car that is a battering ram. It's got a reinforced chassis. You have a siren, you have a megaphone, you have lights, you have a GPS system in that car to track you, you have a radio that can call other officers in for backup. And then when you get out of the car, you have a bulletproof vest on, you have tactical gear, whether it's pepper spray, you have a baton, you have, you literally have a citation book where you can cite me for any infraction that I may have made. And that's before you get to the point that you get to carry a loaded gun. And yet when you come to my car, it's my job to make you feel safe because I'm black. Like, if that's the case, then what is all the other stuff for? If I have to make you feel safe, like that sucks. Like, you're supposed to make me feel safe. Right? Like, That's the oath that you took, is to protect and serve your community. And I'm in your community. I'm a taxpayer in your community. You're supposed to make me feel safe. I'm supposed to feel like that if you pull me over, that there is a legitimate reason for you pulling me over, and that you're going to nicely explain the infraction, and then there's a process that we follow. If there is no infraction, I'm thinking you're pulling me over because you're going to let me know about something unsafe ahead. Like, hey, Mr. Jones, I saw you going down this street. The bridge is out. We need everybody to stop. That's never happened to me, though. I have been pulled over for making a left turn at a light after yielding and been told that by an officer. You made a left turn. Yes, officer, I did. I had to come into this part, this lot. Well, your left turn seemed aggressive. Oh, okay. And it's tough to have to explain to your kids who are sitting in the car, like, Dad, why did we get pulled over? Well, the officer said I made a left turn. Well, you're supposed to, right? Yes. Then why did he pull us over? Well, I'm black and I'm in a luxury car. I get no ticket. I go on about my day. So yeah, I wish that even, like my friend said, you've accomplished things, and you're educated, and you've achieved, you work. You don't have to deal with this. I wish that were true. I wish people who worked hard and did well, regardless of their religion, race, or creed, didn't have to deal with being profiled and treated like a criminal until it was 100% proven that they are not guilty. I wish they didn't have to go through that, but unfortunately they do. And the biggest thing about the George Floyd situation is that, look, when we see George Floyd and when we see that video, the truth is it reminds us of us. Because when I see the George Floyd video, when I saw it the first time, I was disgusted. But what it does, it lets me know, and it reminds me that I was one police officer's decision away from being in that situation. I've been one white person's decision away from being in that situation. One profile or one description away from being in that situation. And the truth is when we see videos like Ahmaud Arbery being shot and killed, when we see situations like Trayvon Martin, we know that it could have been any one of us. It does not matter that we've done everything right in our lives. It does not matter that our parents raised us to be good people. It does not matter that I'm educated. It does not matter that I have kids. It does not matter that I'm married. It does not matter that I'm a member of my community who gives back. It doesn't matter. Like, that's the thing that's hard to accept. Our skin color is being weaponized, and so those things don't matter. And so when we see those videos, and the reason why people are out there marching and are fighting for this is because we see and feel and live every day the full iceberg that is social injustice. Like most people, they just see the tip of it. Like when you see a video like, oh, Ahmaud Arbery was shot and killed jogging in his neighborhood that he lives in by a group of white men who just felt like that it was their job to police the neighborhood. That sucks. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And it makes the news, and most of my colleagues who don't look like me, they see it from afar, and then it's kind of like they're in a plane 30,000 feet and it flies by. And then a week later, it's not talked about anymore. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And it's tough because I'm a threat until it is absolutely proven that I'm not. And yet I can watch a video of Kyle Rittenhouse walking down the street in Kenosha, which is a town I used to live right down the street from when I lived in Illinois. I've been to Kenosha. I've hung out in Kenosha. I watched Kyle Rittenhouse walk down the street towards police officers with a loaded AR-15 after officers are being called in because shots have been fired. And he is not a threat. He walks up to a police officer in a car, and over the megaphone, the police officer asks him for directions. Like, hey, Kyle, where do I need to go? And then I see a group of people on TV come to Kyle's defense and say, well, he had the right to defend himself. I see how you can make that argument. But you know, there is another 17-year-old that had a right to defend himself. His name was Trayvon Martin. Because Trayvon Martin was walking down the street at 17 years old. Instead of an AR-15, he had a pack of Skittles. There was no disturbance in the neighborhood. He was just deemed suspicious because he was wearing a hoodie. He was determined to be a threat. He had no rights. And he got killed, murdered. And his murderer is out doing book signings and motivational speeches. Like, it's crazy. Because at the end of the day, even if you throw the race component out the window, why isn't it just simply wrong for a grown man to kill a kid who lives in his neighborhood? Like, where was that argument at? Like, the simple fact that a grown adult man killed a kid, if I go out in the neighborhood that I live in and kill somebody else's kid because he's walking by, like, these things are absolutely constant reminders to me that our social justice system is not broken. It is a system that has been iterated and perfected. It's been perfected. So much so that it hides literally in plain daylight. Like most of my colleagues, most of you, like, you have no idea because you've never had to be exposed to it. It's so efficient and so effective that it bleeds into our society at every single level, and it hides in plain daylight. It bleeds into our financial system. It bleeds into our health system. It bleeds into our employment system. All of those systems and more are infected by social injustice. And for most of my colleagues, like, it's never going to affect you. But it's right there. And it sucks. Like, it's tough to accept sometimes. But I was taught to work hard and be hopeful. So that's what I know, and that's what I do. And that's why some of you who see this video and you've known me for a long time will say, man, I've never, James, you never talked about this before. Like, you've never expressed this before. Pushing forward, right? Like, I don't have time to be angry every time injustice impacts me because of the color of my skin. If I want to be successful. Look, in closing, it's fair to say that all races, religions, creeds in this world, in this country, have made some sort of contribution to our humanity, right? Like, you think about the number of discoveries in healthcare, in technology, like, we've done all of this that we have in 2020 despite suppressing an entire race of people in this country. Like, and I'm not talking about like a few people, I'm talking like a double-digit percentage of the population we've suppressed. Like, imagine what we could have achieved. Imagine what we can achieve. Like, if we just treat each other better. If we just made sure that our youth had the same opportunities regardless of religion or race. Like, if we just did better for them. Like, imagine where we could be in 20 years, in 40 years, in 60 years. Like, you're talking a double-digit percentage of your population. You got people in their 30s and 40s today in that population who literally have never had a good education, who have been on government assistance their entire life with no intention on our system of ever getting them out of it, with the goal of keeping their kids on it and their grandkids on it. That's a double-digit percentage of the population. And yeah, hard work and you can make it out. Yep, I made it out. My parents worked hard. But truth is, I'm an outlier, right? Like, I may be, some people may see me as someone who slipped through the cracks. But why are we still doing it? Like, we have to stop oppressing people. We have to stand together, not for a short while, not until this blows over, but we have to stand together forever to truly end this. Like, this can't be a 2020, George Floyd was murdered, we got it, we all play our part, and in 2021 we're like, hey, coronavirus vaccine, and we're good now, let's get back to business and forget about this. Like, we have to truly rewrite our social justice system and policies. And we have to figure out a way to give everyone in this country a similar opportunity, a similar set of resources. Like, we should just live in a system where if we're going to give you the same opportunities that we give everybody else, and those of you who want to work hard and work twice as hard or work 3 times as hard, you're going to get to your goals. And those of you who don't work hard and choose at a certain point to say, I want to party over work, or I want to do this, and you don't balance that, you're not going to reach your goals. But the truth is we need a society of people at the top who work hard and want to work hard. Right now, we have a large population, a large percentage of our population at the top are at the top because there was someone in their generation 2 or 3 generations ago who worked hard. And now we have people at the top who just are there. And they're not really contributing. They're just figuring out how to keep their family line there. And I get that, but you got to think about what that means to the bigger picture. Race shouldn't matter. What should matter is, can you contribute or not? And what's your contribution? So I'll leave you with this. How do we take down a perfected social justice system and stand up an equal justice system to create the perfect country? And that's the challenge. The U.S. justice system is not broken, it's perfected. And it's perfected in design, and it's designed to suppress an entire race of people. And we have to figure out how to build an equal justice system. Doesn't mean tearing everything down, but we have to change it. And it's going to take all of us to do it. It's going to take a radical change to do it. And we got to ask ourselves if we're up for it. Thanks for tuning in.